The year was 2275, and humanity had spread its wings across the stars. From the bustling hub of New Earth to the frontier colonies on the edge of known space, human presence was felt throughout the galaxy. The colonies thrived, but a lingering sense of unease began to creep in from the farthest reaches of the galaxy. It started small, with the occasional static-filled signal, odd, cryptic bursts of radio waves emanating from the dark, unexplored regions of space. The signals were weak, fragmented, but they were unmistakable. Someone, or something, was out there. Captain Elias Ward sat in the dimly lit operations room aboard the Archer, his warship stationed near the mining colony of Lyra 5. Ward was a veteran, seasoned by countless battles and missions. He was known for his calm demeanor and a gut instinct that had saved his crew more than once. But today, something gnawed at him. The cryptic signals were becoming more frequent, more urgent. His crew had begun to notice, too. Despite the fact that the signals didn't pose a direct threat, they were unsettling. Every transmission had the same message: "We are coming." No context, no source, only that phrase, repeating like a haunting whisper on the comms. "Captain," another one. The comms officer, Lieutenant Moore, called out, her voice tight with tension. Same pattern, same frequency. It's almost like a countdown. Ward nodded slowly, his mind racing. He had seen this before, incidents where strange, unexplainable phenomena preceded something catastrophic. The last time humanity encountered a similar situation was nearly a century ago, when the Krathri, an aggressive alien race, had made their first move. The feeling now was different, though. The Krathri had made their presence known with force. This was different. Whoever, or whatever, was sending these signals was silent, lurking just beyond reach, waiting. The ominous message felt more like a warning than a declaration of war. "I want every system on alert," Ward ordered, his voice cutting through the low hum of the room. "We're not letting this go unnoticed. I need full scans of every frequency we can get. This isn't just some random interference." The crew moved quickly, their faces set with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Ward's eyes remained focused on the star-filled expanse outside the ship's observation deck, his thoughts drifting to the fleet's last encounter with unknown forces. That had been a failed negotiation with a race known as the Xalthan. Could this signal be connected to them? Or something worse? Ward's musings were interrupted by a sudden violent tremor that shook the ship. A blaring alarm rang throughout the Archer, and the lights flickered. The crew scrambled to their stations, uncertainty in their movements. "Report," Ward barked, gripping the edge of the console. Moore's fingers flew across the comms panel. "Captain, we're picking up an unknown craft, but it's not showing up on our scanners. No heat signatures, no signals. Just a shadow." She paused, eyes wide with disbelief. "It's like it's invisible." Ward's heart skipped. An invisible ship. Impossible. Technology like that was beyond anything humanity had developed. And yet, the evidence was clear. Something was there, hiding, waiting. "How is that even possible?" Moore muttered, tapping frantically at the controls. Ward's mind worked quickly. It wasn't the first time humanity had encountered strange phenomena beyond their understanding, but every instance had led to a disaster. The Xalthan had deployed cloaking tech during their invasion, and humanity had barely managed to hold their ground. But this was different. No one had ever seen anything like this before. "Alert all nearby colonies. We have to warn them," Ward said sharply. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. This is no ordinary ship. It's not here to negotiate." The Archer lurched forward as it engaged its engines, pushing toward the shadowed coordinates of the unknown vessel. Ward's mind raced as he considered the possibilities. Was this the beginning of a new war? Were the silent messages part of a larger plan, an invasion? He didn't have answers, but he knew one thing. Humanity wasn't ready for whatever came next. "Captain," Moore's voice broke through his thoughts. "It's not just one ship. We're picking up dozens. A fleet. Ward's eyes narrowed as he stared at the data streaming across the console. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of ships, all cloaked, all untraceable. No transmissions, no warnings, just a vast, silent fleet on the outskirts of the system. "Get me on the comm with command," Ward ordered, his tone growing steely. "Tell them we've got company. And this time, it's not the kind we're used to." The silence was deafening as Ward stared at the darkened expanse of space. Whoever, or whatever, this fleet was, they had come, and humanity was about to learn the hard way that the universe held more mysteries than anyone had ever bargained for. The Archer surged forward, its engines pushing the ship toward the unknown fleet lurking just beyond the outer edges of the Lyra-5 system. Captain Elias Ward stood at the helm, his jaw clenched, eyes narrowed. The untraceable fleet, stretching across the darkness of space, had appeared as silently as a shadow. No communications, no signature. They didn't announce themselves. They simply were. The implications of that were chilling. "Captain, I'm picking up strange fluctuations in the surrounding space," Lieutenant Moore reported, her voice tight. "It's as if the fabric of space itself is being distorted. I can't get an accurate read on their location." Ward's hand gripped the edge of the console. The situation was becoming more complex with every passing moment. "Keep the scans going, Moore. We need to know what we're dealing with before we get any closer." Ward glanced out the observation port. The stars, usually bright and sharp in the vacuum of space, appeared warped. Their lights shimmered strangely, like the image of a star caught in rippling water. Something wasn't right here, and that something was staring them down from the dark. "Commander on deck," Ward muttered under his breath as the ship's sensors flickered again. The unknown fleet had vanished from the radar. Again. It was as if the entire group of ships simply blinked out of existence. "Sir, the fleet. It's gone. There's nothing on the scanners," Moore said, her voice strained. "I don't understand. They were right here." Ward's mind raced. He'd fought in wars, tracked down enemies who thought they could hide, but never in his career had he encountered an enemy that could disappear from all detection. "Bring us into the last known coordinates," Ward ordered. "We'll search the old-fashioned way." As the Archer slowly maneuvered into position, the tension on the bridge was palpable. Crew members moved with purpose, trying to lock onto the invisible fleet, but nothing made sense. They were blind, completely in the dark. Suddenly, a flare of bright blue light flashed across the horizon, illuminating the surrounding space like a brief bolt of lightning. Ward's heart skipped a beat. "There, on the starboard side," Moore cried out. "That's them. It's one ship, but it's massive. It's right there, Captain." Ward's gaze snapped to the readout. The ship was enormous, at least 10 times the size of the Archer. Its shape was odd, like an angular, jagged black silhouette against the stars. But before Ward could make sense of it, the ship seemed to dissolve into the background, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. "Damn it," Ward growled, slamming his fist into the armrest of his chair. This wasn't just some trick. Whoever was behind this was playing with them, and Ward wasn't sure whether he was meant to be scared or to keep pressing forward. One thing was certain. They were running out of time. "Stay sharp, everyone," Ward commanded, his voice growing colder. "This is no ordinary cloaking tech. These ships, whatever they are doing something to our sensors. We need to figure out how they're hiding, or we'll lose them completely." Just as Ward finished speaking, the quiet hum of the ship's engine systems shifted. A low, almost imperceptible vibration ran through the floor. A deep sound, like distant thunder, rumbled throughout the ship. "Report," Ward barked, gripping the console tighter. "It's them, Captain," Moore said, her eyes wide. "The fleet, it's moving. I'm getting sporadic pulses now, flashes of energy from multiple points across the system. There's no way they should be able to move that fast. They're traveling at FTL speeds, but without any proper warp signatures." Ward clenched his jaw. Faster than light travel was something humanity had just begun to experiment with, and even then, it was unstable and wildly unpredictable. These ships, whatever they were bypassing the laws of physics entirely. A blip suddenly appeared on the radar. A tiny, flickering dot, like the faintest hint of a distant star. But this wasn't a star. It was a ship, unmistakable. In the blink of an eye, the blip became a solid object on the view screen, a jagged black ship looming large, cutting through space as though it were nothing more than a shadow. The bridge crew collectively froze, their gazes locked onto the screen. The ship's design was unlike anything they'd seen. It was sleek, angular, and gave off a faint, shimmering aura that seemed to bend the light around it, making it appear almost transparent. "Is it here?" Moore whispered, her voice barely audible. Ward stared at the ship, feeling the hairs on the back of his neck rise. The ship was impossibly still, as if it were waiting, its engines completely silent. Then, a loud, sharp ping echoed through the Archer. A single transmission, harsh and fragmented, broke through the comms. "We are the Silent Fleet." A distorted voice echoed across the bridge, making every crew member shiver. "Do not approach further. You have been warned." Before anyone could react, the signal cut off. The ship flickered one final time and vanished. But the Archer was still locked in its place, caught in the invisible web of the Silent Fleet. Ward's voice was steady, but his words cut like a blade. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We're not backing down. Whatever game they're playing, it ends now." The stakes were clear. The Silent Fleet was no longer a mystery to be solved. It was a threat, and Ward had no intention of letting it slip away again. He wasn't going to wait for them to make the first move. The Archer drifted cautiously through the void, the eerie silence of space hanging heavily in the air. Captain Elias Ward stood at the helm, his mind working furiously to process the events of the past few hours. The encounter with the Silent Fleet had left him with more questions than answers. The way the fleet had moved, so effortlessly, so silently, was beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. They weren't just hiding. They were shifting the rules of engagement, bending the fabric of space itself to conceal their movements. "Captain, we're still locked in the same position," Lieutenant Moore said, her voice strained with the weight of the unknown. "We're just outside their last known coordinates, but I can't detect any other ships. It's like they vanished." Ward's eyes narrowed. "They are here, Moore. I know it. We just can't see them." Moore nodded, continuing to scan the empty space. The rest of the crew moved in tense silence, unsure of what to do next. Ward's gaze shifted to the data on the console in front of him. The pulse readings were still faint but consistent, indicating that something was out there, just beyond the threshold of detection. Suddenly, the ship's lights flickered, and the entire bridge seemed to hum with a strange energy. It was as though the very air was charged with anticipation. "Captain," Moore said, her voice quivering slightly, "I'm picking up something." "No, someone." On the comms. Ward turned toward her, brow furrowing. "What do you mean, someone?" Before Moore could answer, the ship was rocked by a violent wave of energy that rattled the bulkheads. The lights dimmed further, and the hum intensified to an almost unbearable pitch. "Report," Ward shouted, gripping the armrest of his chair. "This is impossible," Moore muttered, tapping furiously at the console. "It's coming from within the fleet, within their ship." The voice that filled the bridge was distorted, guttural, and yet undeniably human. It resonated with an unsettling calmness, a tone that suggested age and weariness, but also an ancient, untold power. "Captain Ward," the voice boomed, "you have ventured too far, yet there is still hope. But it will cost you dearly." Ward's hand froze on the console as he processed the words. "Who are you? What do you want with humanity?" There was a long pause before the voice answered, every word thick with the weight of something much older than the human race. "We are the Silent Fleet. We are the guardians of the galaxy's secret, the protectors of the truth buried beneath its stars. We are the last remnants of an ancient war that you cannot fathom. Ward exchanged glances with Moore and the rest of his crew, their faces pale with uncertainty. What was this? A threat? A warning? The voice continued, undeterred. The Archons are coming, it said, the words hanging in the air like an icy weight. They have been watching your people for centuries. They will not rest until you have been consumed. You must prepare. Archons, Ward echoed, his pulse quickening. He'd never heard the term before. Who? What are they? The voice seemed to tremble with a sorrowful understanding, as though recounting a tale that had been told too many times to count. The Archons are the ones who shape time and space. They are the rulers of the lost worlds, the masters of dark forces beyond your comprehension. Their invasion is not like any other you have faced. It is not about domination. It is about erasure. Entire civilizations have fallen before them, erased from history, from existence itself. And you, humanity, are next. Ward clenched his jaw, his thoughts racing. The weight of the words pressed down on him. He had seen war, fought countless battles, but what this voice described sounded like nothing he had ever encountered. If the Archons were as powerful as the voice claimed, humanity didn't stand a chance. What do you want from us? Ward demanded, the words escaping in a rush of frustration. We want nothing, the voice responded, its tone cold but not without a hint of regret. We are bound by the oaths of our forebears. We are the remnants of the last great war, transformed by the Archon's power and forced to hide in the shadows for eternity. Our only purpose now is to stop them, and that is why we have come for you. Ward's pulse quickened as he struggled to digest the information. The Silent Fleet wasn't just a group of cloaked ships or rogue guardians. It was something else entirely. It was a warning. What do you mean, come for us? What are you asking of humanity? Moore asked, her voice trembling. The voice paused, and for a moment, there was nothing but the harsh, static-filled silence of the comms. You will help us, the voice finally said, its tone heavy with finality. We have the power to fight the Archons, but we need your strength, your will. If you refuse, you will die, and the galaxy will fall. But if you stand with us, we will fight together, and you may just survive. Ward felt a chill run down his spine. The choice was clear. Humanity could either trust the Silent Fleet, these mysterious, seemingly ancient guardians, or reject them and risk the wrath of the Archons. We'll need more than your words to trust you, Ward said, his voice low and steady, though his mind raced. We'll need to know what you're offering, and we'll need to understand how to stop this invasion. The voice seemed to soften, almost as if it were acknowledging a long-forgotten understanding. You will understand soon enough, it said. But be warned, our path is not an easy one. Once you choose, there is no turning back. The Archons will feel your resistance, and they will come for you first. Ward took a deep breath, his mind swimming with possibilities and dangers. This wasn't just a war, it was a reckoning. And humanity, for better or worse, was about to be drawn into it. The room was thick with the weight of uncertainty as Captain Ward listened to the last words of the mysterious voice. The bridge of the Archer felt like a cavern, every inch echoing with the gravity of the decision that loomed before them. Ward's mind raced. Allies or enemies? Was this the answer they had been waiting for, or was it a trap? Another cosmic snare set by forces far beyond their understanding. Captain, Moore said softly, breaking the heavy silence. We don't have much time. The Archons, if they're as dangerous as they sound. Ward cut her off with a sharp wave. I know, but we don't have a choice. We can't take on something like that alone. We need whatever advantage we can get. The crew shifted uneasily at the mention of the Archons. None of them knew what to expect, but everyone could feel the weight of the decision pressing on them. Ward stood up from his chair and walked toward the observation window, staring into the abyss beyond. The stars seemed distant, cold. How could humanity stand up to something as vast, as ancient as the Archons. They said, once you choose, there's no turning back, Ward muttered, his voice more to himself than anyone else. If we accept this offer, we're committing ourselves to this war. And we're gambling everything on an ancient fleet that's been hiding in the shadows for millennia. And if we don't? Moore asked, her voice tense. Then we die, and everything we fought for, all the progress humanity has made, disappears without a trace. There was no easy answer, but Ward knew one thing for certain. If the Archons were really as powerful as the voice claimed, there was no option but to fight. And they couldn't fight alone. Not against beings who could erase entire civilizations. We have to contact Command, Ward said, turning back toward the crew. Tell them what we know, what we've learned. We can't make this decision in isolation. We need the entire fleet on board. Moore nodded, her fingers dancing over the comms panel. I'll send a transmission to the nearest command post. It'll take a while for them to respond, though. Ward exhaled, the tension in his shoulders not easing in the slightest. They had no time to waste. Get it done. Meanwhile, I want full diagnostics on our weapons systems. If we're going to take on the Archons, we need to be ready for anything. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The crew moved efficiently, each person performing their duties with precision, but there was no denying the growing anxiety that hung in the air. Ward couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something big, and whatever it was, they weren't ready. Captain, Moore's voice came again, a little breathless. We've received a transmission from Command. They've authorized the operation. But there's something else. They're not the only ones involved. We've been ordered to rendezvous with the Lyra 3 outpost. They've reported sightings of large, unidentified objects moving toward our system. They think it's the Archons, and they're preparing for a counteroffensive. Ward's mind raced as he absorbed the information. Lyra 3. It was one of the most heavily fortified outposts in the sector, a hub for military activity. If the Archons were really targeting them, it was only a matter of time before the entire system was engulfed in war. Get us to Lyra 3, Ward ordered, his voice steely. Now, and send word to the Silent Fleet. Tell them we've made our choice. We're in. The Archer began to turn, its engines roaring to life as they set course for Lyra 3. Ward felt a flicker of resolve deep within him. They had no idea what the Silent Fleet truly was, or what the price of their assistance would be. But they could no longer afford to question it. The fate of humanity rested on this decision. As the ship moved toward the rendezvous point, Ward couldn't help but think about the message from the voice. You will understand soon enough, it had said. What did that mean? Was the Silent Fleet just offering their support, or was there something more? Something they weren't telling them. He had to trust that they would find out soon. But trust was a dangerous thing in the vast, uncertain reaches of space. The stars outside began to blur as the ship entered faster than light travel. The Archer surged ahead, the black void of space stretching infinitely before them. They were leaving the quiet, eerie atmosphere of the Lyra 5 system behind, heading toward the unknown. The coming battle would test them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Ward stood by the observation window, his eyes locked on the swirling stars ahead. It was not the first time he had been thrust into uncertainty, but it felt different this time. The Archons were a shadow that loomed ever larger, and as they moved toward Lyra 3, Ward knew one thing. Humanity was about to enter a war that could alter the very fabric of existence itself. And the Silent Fleet was their only hope. The Archer emerged from faster-than-light travel in the Lyra 3 system, the vast, bustling outpost now visible on the view screen. Lyra 3 was a beacon of human strength in this corner of the galaxy, a military fortress surrounded by a network of ships, defense platforms, and supply stations. It was also the last line of defense before the deeper reaches of the galaxy, territory that had never been fully explored, and territories now threatened by something far worse than anything humanity had ever encountered. As the ship docked at the outpost's secure bay, Ward's mind was still racing. The silent fleet had responded to their call for aid. But what did that truly mean? Were they allies, or was this part of a larger, more complex plan he couldn't yet fathom? The truth was, Ward didn't know if they were entering an alliance or walking into a trap. The Archer's docking clamps hissed as they connected with the bay, and Ward stood from his chair, tension still crawling along his spine. He was about to face higher command and brief them on everything he'd learned, everything they had seen. As Ward and Moore exited the bridge, a sense of urgency filled the air. The crew, too, moved with purpose, knowing that every second counted. The sound of boots echoed against the metallic floors as they made their way to the command center. There, a dozen officers awaited, their faces lit by the glow of control panels and tactical readouts. Captain Ward, General Silas Voss, the commanding officer of the Lyra 3 base, said, his voice gruff, betraying no emotion. "I've been briefed on your encounter with the Silent Fleet. I'll admit, this is unexpected. But our priority now is dealing with the Archons. We've detected an anomaly on the outer edge of the system, a large-scale energy disturbance. It's too much to ignore." Ward nodded, stepping toward the central holotable. The projected map above it displayed the system's star and its various planetary orbits. At the outer rim, something was pulsing, a strange, erratic energy signature that could only mean one thing. The Archons had arrived. "We're not sure what we're dealing with, but the readings suggest something massive," Voss continued. "We've sent reconnaissance drones to get closer, but we're losing contact. Whatever they're doing, it's disrupting communications across the entire system." "The Archons are here," Ward said, his voice hard. "And they're not just here to invade. They're here to wipe us out." A tense silence fell over the room. Everyone in the room understood the gravity of Ward's words. This wasn't a typical invasion. This was something on a scale they had never encountered, something designed not just to conquer, but to erase. "We can't afford to wait," Moore said, stepping forward. "We need to join forces with the Silent Fleet immediately. They've made it clear they're our only chance." Ward turned to face the general. "What's your plan, sir? We don't have much time." General Voss took a long, deep breath. "We've prepared the Lyra 3 station for a full-scale defense. But it's not enough. We're already outnumbered. The Archons are here to level the playing field, not just with force, but with their technology. We've never encountered anything like it. Then we need the Silent Fleet. Now," Ward said, his voice firm. "You've seen their ships. They've fought this war before. They know how to face the Archons." General Voss stared at him for a long moment before nodding reluctantly. "All right, Ward, you've got your fleet. But the Silent Fleet needs to understand this isn't just about firepower. We'll need every ship, every soldier, every strategy we've got if we want to hold them off." Ward's heart pounded in his chest. He had the Silent Fleet at his back, but even that wasn't enough. The Archons were not just a military force. They were something darker, more insidious. The first battle would be crucial. They had to buy time. Time to understand their enemy. Time to learn how to fight back. At that moment, a comm signal came through. It was a transmission from the Silent Fleet. "Captain Ward," the voice from the fleet spoke, its tone calm and distant. "We have arrived. We will assist in the coming battle, but understand this. The Archons will test you. They will show no mercy. Prepare yourselves for the war that will reshape the galaxy. When we engage, we do so knowing it may be our last battle, and it will be yours as well." Ward exchanged a glance with Moore, his thoughts weighing heavily. There would be no turning back. They had made the choice. Now they had to see it through. "We're ready," Ward said, his voice steely. "We will engage in 30 minutes, the voice from the Silent Fleet responded. "Prepare yourselves." As the transmission ended, Ward turned back to the command room. The officers were already in motion, their minds focused entirely on the task ahead. The time for questioning was over. It was time to act. Get the fleet ready. Initiate all defensive protocols, General Voss ordered, his voice cutting through the tension. We're going to need every advantage we can get. Ward took one final glance at the map. The Archons were coming, and they would not stop until everything had been erased. But humanity would fight back. They had no other choice. We will survive, Ward muttered under his breath, and we will make them regret ever thinking they could erase us. The storm had arrived. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin. The Archer sat in the heart of Lyra III's defensive fleet, its engines powering down as they entered a holding pattern. The tension among the crew was palpable, a thick silence hanging over the bridge as they prepared for the unknown. Ahead, the Lyra III outpost shimmered like a fortress in the dark, bristling with defense platforms, weapons arrays, and battle-ready ships. Yet none of that seemed enough when weighed against the shadow that loomed at the edge of the system. Ward stood at the helm, his eyes focused on the display as the faint pulse of the Archon's energy signature grew stronger. It was a dark, unsettling presence that seemed to suck the life out of everything it touched. He could feel it, a pressure in the back of his skull that wouldn't relent, like the very stars themselves were recoiling in fear. "Captain," Moore said, her voice cutting through the thick silence. "The silent fleet has deployed. They're moving into formation. They're just disappearing into the blackness. It's like they're bending space around them." Ward's breath caught. He had seen the power of the silent fleet firsthand, but it was another thing entirely to see them in action. The fleet didn't just travel through space. They seemed to dissolve into it, slipping between dimensions like phantoms. It was the stuff of legends, yet Ward couldn't shake the feeling that despite their advanced technology, they might be walking into a storm even the silent fleet couldn't weather. The bridge doors opened with a hiss, and General Voss stepped onto the deck, flanked by his officers. The general's face was grim, his usually stoic demeanor marred by the weight of the situation. "We're in position," Voss said, his eyes scanning the tactical readouts. "The Archons are moving toward us. Their ships are unlike anything we've seen. Massive, geometric, and completely silent. They don't register on our scanners the way other ships do. It's as if they don't exist until they choose to." Ward nodded. He had already heard as much from the silent fleet, but hearing it from the general's mouth made it all too real. "Any word from the silent fleet?" Ward asked. "We're about to find out," Voss replied, tapping his earpiece. "All ships on alert. We're engaging on my command. Hold tight." Moments later, a cold, distant voice echoed through the ship's comms. It was the leader of the silent fleet, its tone calm but filled with an ancient wisdom that was hard to ignore. "We have engaged," the voice said. "The Archons have revealed themselves. You will see them now." As the words faded, the view screen flickered, and for the first time, Ward saw the true scale of what they were up against. Hundreds of ships, massive and silent, began to materialize from the void. They were not ships as humanity understood them. These were towering, geometric structures, impossibly large and angular, with no visible engines or markings. Their surfaces shimmered and rippled like liquid metal, but beneath the surface, something darker moved, dark energy that made Ward's blood run cold. The ships hovered in the distance, radiating a silent, oppressive force. It was as if they were alive, sentient, and aware of the human presence. The space between the Archer and the nearest Archon vessel seemed to stretch into infinity, yet at the same time, it felt suffocatingly close. "Get us in range, now," Ward barked. "Prepare all weapons, full shields." Voss's voice came over the comm again, steady despite the chaos. "All ships, engage the Archons on my mark. This is it. Fight or die." As the fleet moved into formation, Ward's thoughts raced. They were about to face a force far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. The Archons were not merely conquerors. They were destroyers of civilizations, masters of dark, unknowable forces. But they had to fight. There was no retreat now. Every ship, every life, depended on it. "Captain," Moore said urgently, pointing at the screen. The silent fleet. They're moving. No, they're shifting their positions. It's like they're folding space around them, appearing and disappearing at will. The Archons don't even seem to see them. Ward watched, awe and terror mixed in his chest, as the silent fleet dissolved into the fabric of space, reappearing only when necessary, like ghosts haunting the edge of reality. They were using their superior technology to outmaneuver the Archons, but Ward knew that this would only buy them so much time. Eventually, the Archons would adjust. And when they did, the first strike came without warning. A pulse of dark energy, impossibly fast, hit one of the silent fleet's ships. The vessel shimmered in the void, its form twisting and distorting under the Archons' attack. For a brief moment, Ward thought the ship would collapse entirely, but it didn't. Instead, it folded, vanishing entirely, as though it had never existed. "Shit," Moore muttered under her breath. "The Archons aren't playing around," Ward said, his voice cold and measured. "We need to be ready for anything." But then, something unexpected happened. A ripple in the space before them. The silent fleet's ships began to converge, surrounding the Archons. For a brief moment, the geometry of the two fleets collided in a beautiful, chaotic dance, silent, but charged with an energy that felt almost tangible. Ward's heart raced as he realized what was happening. The silent fleet wasn't just fighting. They were forcing the Archons into a trap. "Captain," Moore said, her voice sharp with excitement. "The silent fleet's pulling them in. They're isolating their ships." Ward's lips curled into a grim smile. It was a long shot, but it was their best chance. If they could isolate the Archons, they might have a chance to strike back. "All hands, prepare for engagement," Ward ordered, his voice cutting through the tension. "We fight with everything we have." And with that, the battle began in earnest. The forces of humanity and the silent fleet clashing with the Archons, a war unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The fate of everything rested on this moment. The clash between the silent fleet and the Archons erupted like a storm, a burst of unimaginable energy that tore through the fabric of space itself. Ward gripped the armrest of his command chair as the Archer rocked under the force of distant explosions. The view screen flickered, showing the chaotic battle unfolding just beyond Lyra 3. The silent fleet was a blur of motion, ships appearing and disappearing in the blink of an eye, their movements so precise and fluid it seemed as though they were manipulating time itself. But despite their superior tactics, they were facing something the galaxy had never seen before. The Archons weren't just battling with conventional weapons. They were wielding something far darker, an energy that distorted the very laws of physics. With each pulse from their ships, entire sectors of space seemed to warp, collapsing in on themselves, only to unfold again in impossible configurations. It was like reality itself was being stretched by their presence. "Captain, look," Moore shouted, her voice shaking as the display showed a silent fleet vessel flicker into view, and then disappear, as though it had been consumed by the very void it occupied. The ship hadn't just been destroyed. It had been erased, wiped from existence with no trace of its passing. The Archons' weapons didn't just damage. They obliterated, leaving no remnants, no evidence of the civilizations they had once destroyed. Ward's blood ran cold as he watched the silent fleet ships maneuvering, their attacks calculated and relentless. They were pushing the Archons back, but the enemy was adapting faster than they could counter. For every silent fleet ship that disappeared, 2 more Archon vessels appeared, seemingly from nowhere. The battlefield was a shifting nightmare, an ever-expanding war zone where nothing stayed the same for long. "We can't win this with just brute force," Ward muttered under his breath, his eyes flicking over the tactical display. The silent fleet had proven its superiority in agility, but it wasn't enough to break the Archons' relentless assault. They needed something more, something the Archons didn't expect. Moore glanced over at Ward. "What are you thinking, Captain?" Ward's mind was racing. He had to find a way to strike at the Archons' core, to exploit their weakness, if they even had one. But the Archons' method of war was unlike anything he had encountered. Their weapons bent space and time, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. And yet, they were clearly organized, guided by intelligence, and that meant there had to be something to exploit. His eyes darted to the nearest Archon vessel, its dark, geometric shape hovering at the center of the conflict. That's when it hit him. The Archons weren't just manipulating space. They were manipulating consciousness. Their energy wasn't merely physical. It was designed to distort the minds of those who encountered it, bending the will and perception of those who faced them. It was a weapon they had yet to fully understand. But now Ward saw it for what it was. If they could disrupt that connection, if they could sever the Archons' control over their ships, they might have a chance. More, send a pulse through the fleet's comms network, Ward ordered. We're going to disrupt their connection. We need to scramble their systems, anything to cut off their command structure. Moore's eyes widened as she processed the plan. But Captain, the Archons are everywhere. We'd need to hit every ship simultaneously. I know, but we've got one shot at this, Ward said. The silent fleet can't hold out forever. We need to give them the opening they need to strike at the core. Moore nodded, her fingers flying over the console. I'll need some time to adjust the comms. The interference from the Archon's energy is making it difficult to get a clear signal. Ward turned toward the view screen, watching the battle unfold. Lyra 3's outer defenses were holding, but it wouldn't be enough to protect them if the Archons reached the station. The stakes were clear. If the Archons took control of the system, there would be no turning back. As Moore worked, the bridge filled with the sound of distant explosions and the hum of the ship's systems struggling to maintain power. Ward's gaze remained fixed on the silent fleet, now moving closer to the Archons. They were closing in, engaging in a deadly dance that could turn at any moment. And then it came. Pulse ready, Moore said, her voice tinged with urgency. Ward gave a sharp nod. Do it. A low hum filled the room as Moore sent the pulse through the fleet's comms network. Ward held his breath, his eyes locked on the tactical display. For a moment, nothing happened. The chaos of the battle continued, the Archons and silent fleet locked in a relentless struggle. Then it happened. A ripple passed through the Archon fleet, almost imperceptible at first. The dark energy that enveloped the Archon ships wavered, fluctuating as though it had been disturbed. Ward's heart raced as he saw it. One of the Archon ships faltered, its sleek form shifting awkwardly, as though it had lost its grip on reality. The disruption worked. For the briefest moment, the Archons' perfect control shattered. Their ships, still powerful, became erratic, their once coordinated movements now scattered and unpredictable. The silent fleet immediately seized the opportunity, their ships darting in with surgical precision, cutting through the Archons' disarray like knives through paper. We've got them, Moore breathed, her eyes wide as she watched the scene unfold. Ward didn't let himself relax. Not yet. Not yet. Keep the pulse going. We've got to maintain the pressure. The battle was far from over, but the tide had shifted. The Archons were reeling, and for the first time, the fate of the galaxy seemed like it might not be decided by their unstoppable cosmic force. The silent fleet had their opening, but how much longer could they hold out before the Archons adapted again? As the chaotic dance of battle raged on, Ward realized something critical. Humanity had learned how to fight back, and for the first time in millennia, the galaxy's future was not sealed by the will of the Archons. It was theirs to fight for. The chaos of the battlefield raged on. The heart of the Lyra 3 system transformed into a tumultuous sea of light and shadows. Ward watched with grim satisfaction as the silent fleet continued to exploit the opening they had created. The Archons were no longer the implacable, unstoppable force they had once seemed. Their ships were still formidable, massive geometric structures, their surfaces glistening with dark energy. But now they were faltering. The disruption pulse had shattered their perfect coordination, leaving them vulnerable. Keep pushing. Ward shouted over the din of alarms, and the booming thrum of weapons fire. Don't let up. The moment they stabilize, we're back to square one. Moore's fingers flew over her console, maintaining the pulse that had given the silent fleet its opening. The disruption was keeping the Arkan's ships unbalanced, forcing them into disarray. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. For the first time since the war began, humanity had a real chance. But Ward knew it couldn't last forever. The Arkans were too advanced, too powerful. They would adapt. They always did. The silent fleet was buying them precious minutes, maybe hours, but the window would close soon. They had to end this now, or everything humanity had worked for would crumble in an instant. "Captain," Moore called out, her voice tight with urgency. "The Arkans are starting to regroup. They're shifting their formation, rebuilding their coordination." Ward's gut twisted with unease. The battle was turning against them again, and the pressure was mounting. Every second counted. He could feel the weight of his responsibility pressing down on him. The lives of everyone on Lyra 3, the entire fleet, all depending on a decision that had to be made in the next few moments. "General Voss," Ward said, stepping toward the comms console, "prepare the station's final defensive protocol. If we don't break through here, we won't have a second chance." The general's voice crackled back through the comm. "Understood. If it comes to that, we'll make sure they know that humanity doesn't just survive. We fight." Ward's jaw clenched, but he nodded. He trusted the general, trusted that they would go down fighting if necessary. But he wasn't ready to surrender yet. Not after everything they'd been through. "We need to act fast," Ward muttered, mostly to himself. Then, he turned to Moore. "Is there any way we can amplify the pulse, intensify the disruption?" Moore hesitated, eyes flicking over her console, then her face lit with a sudden idea. "We might be able to. I can reroute power through the auxiliary systems and boost the comms array. It'll put a strain on the ship's systems, but it could give us the edge we need to break them for good." Ward didn't need to hear more. "Do it. We don't have time to waste." Moore's fingers worked quickly, making adjustments to the ship's energy flow and recalibrating the signal. Ward watched as the lights on the bridge flickered, the hum of power shifting into a higher pitch. They were running on fumes now, everything they had thrown into this gamble. But it was their only chance. "Pulse is ready," Moore said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Initiated," Ward ordered. The Archer groaned as the systems pushed beyond their normal limits, sending a much more powerful signal through the fleet. The ripples of disruption intensified, and Ward saw it almost immediately. The Archan ships shuddered, the dark energy that enveloped them flickering and warping. Their movements became even more erratic, and for a crucial moment, they froze. That was all the silent fleet needed. Their ships, already moving at blistering speeds, surged forward with a devastating precision. Blazing energy weapons tore into the Archan vessels, cutting through the once impenetrable dark shields like a hot knife through butter. The silence that had defined the Arkan's presence was shattered by the deafening roar of combat as ships fell, one after another. Ward's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the destruction unfold. It was working. The Arkans were losing control. The pulse had fractured their connection, and now they were vulnerable. He had seen what happened when an Archan ship was torn apart. Their technology didn't just fail, it collapsed, taking the entire ship with it. A single strike could destroy an entire fleet. "Keep the pressure on them," Ward yelled. "We've got them. This is our chance." The battle was reaching its climax. The silent fleet, emboldened by the sudden advantage, struck with ferocity, cutting down Archan ships in a cascade of fiery explosions. But the war wasn't won yet. Ward knew better than to think the Arkans would simply surrender. They had fought to the bitter end before, and they would do so again. Then the unthinkable happened. The largest of the Archan vessels, a monolithic shape that had loomed at the center of the conflict, began to distort. Ward's eyes widened as it started to flicker, its surface warping and collapsing, as if it were being pulled into a singularity. "No way," Ward whispered. "They're retreating." The Archon flagship's form twisted in on itself, collapsing into a singular point of light before vanishing entirely. The rest of the Archon fleet followed suit, their ships flickering and dissolving one by one, disappearing into nothingness. The battle was over. Ward stood there, stunned, watching as the battlefield fell silent. The silent fleet had emerged victorious, and the Archons had retreated into the abyss. Did we do it?" Moore asked, her voice soft, as if afraid to believe it. Ward nodded, a weary smile spreading across his face. "We did." But even as he stood there, the enormity of what had just transpired started to sink in. The Archons were gone, for now, but they would return. They always returned, and humanity, together with the silent fleet, would be ready. For the first time in a long while, Ward allowed himself to hope. The dawn of victory was upon them, but the war was far from over. Humanity had fought, and now the galaxy knew one thing for sure. Humanity was not just a species to be wiped out. They were a force to be reckoned with, and they were here to stay.